Helvio Moraes is professor of English and English literature, language and literature at UNEMAT, that is, at the University of the State of Mato Grosso in Brazil. Dr. Moraes is a member of the research group Utopian e Renascimento in Utopos and Utopos at Unicamp that I mentioned earlier, and also a co-editor of this journal, Morals. Dr. Moraes devoted his early studies to a 17th century Italian author, Francesco Patrizzi da Cherzo, who imagined another happy city in a utopia called La Città Felice. Easy, no? Dr. Moraes translated Patrizzi and studied the theme of utopian thinking, both in that work and in Patrizzi's 10 Dialogues of History, or 10 Dialoghi della Storia. Today he will speak about Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, written in 1627, inheritance and rupture in the utopian genre. Up to you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Most of the utopian literature published in 17th century England, with its pragmatic and often pamphleteering aspect, generates what we can call a projectual tension, which emphasizes the quality of a political proposal to be soon put into practice. During the decades which comprise the pre-revolutionary period through to the Restoration, we can observe on the part of these utopian writers a claim to the possibility of a full exercise of their political freedom, a desire for an active participation and objective interference in the matters of state, one facet only, though a significant facet, of the notion of free will, which in the humanism dates back to the thought of Pico della Mirandola, but which acquires a strong political character when humanist rationalism sets about to ponder on unprecedented forms of political praxis and the ideal configuration of the state. In a tacit or explicit way, such an element can be observed in the most eminent utopian text of the period, Francis Bacon's New Atlantis. According to Luigi Punzo's definition, Bacon's text can be considered a progressive utopia, given its absolute faith in the unlimited possibilities of the new science. As we know, New Atlantis is the living image of how life would be in a world where the scientific enterprise becomes the dominating structure in a political community. It is a text which translates Bacon's aspiration of seeing the institution of a scientific society in which the research is developed in a cooperative manner, mainly based on the experimental science. In this paper, my aim is to point to the relation of Bacon's utopia with Morrow's work, as well as to understand the introduction of a proposal of direct interference in the scientific and political questions of the period, which ends in configuring a new branch or subgenre of utopian literature. It is possible, for instance, to perceive some evidence of what would become the New Atlantis in a little masque performed before the Queen in Gray's Inn at the Christmas of 1594. In it, Bacon indirectly suggests to Elizabeth the foundation of 4 institutions concerning the reform of knowledge. I quote, "First, the collecting of a most perfect and general library, wherein whatsoever the wit of man hath therefore heretofore committed to books of worth, be they ancient or modern, printed or manuscript, European or of other parts, of one or other language, may be made contributory to your wisdom. Next, a spacious, wonderful garden, wherein whatsoever plant, the sun of divers climates, out of the earth of divers modes, either wild or by the culture of man brought forth, may be, with that care that appertains to the good prospering thereof, set and cherished. This garden to be built about with rooms to stable in all rare beasts and to cage in all rare birds, with 2 lakes adjoining, the one of fresh water and the other of salt, for like variety of fishes. And so you may have in a small compass a model of universal nature made private. The third, a goodly huge cabinet, wherein whatsoever the hand of man by exquisite art of or engine hath made rare in stuff, form, or motion, whatsoever singularity, chance, and the shuffle of things hath produced, whatsoever nature hath wrought in things that want life and may be kept, shall be sorted and included. The fourth, such a still house so furnished with mills, instruments, furnaces, and vessels, as may be a palace fit for a philosopher's stone. Thus, a huge library, a botanical and zoological garden, a museum to contain all things done with art and skill, and a great laboratory, creations which much resemble those mentioned in the last part of Bacon's Utopia. Nevertheless, despite his endeavor to persuade the Queen by presenting an idea which would lately become one of the main bases of his thought, that of, I quote, the most innocent and meriting request being the conquest of the works of nature, when your Excellency shall have added depth of knowledge to the fineness of spirits and greatness of your power, then indeed shall you lay at Trismegistus. And then, when all other miracles and wonders shall cease, by reason that you shall have discovered their natural causes, yourself shall be left the only miracle and wonder of the world. Even with such a compelling defense, I repeat, Bacon was not able to induce the Queen to support his cause. After the ascension of James I, Bacon recognizes once more the opportunity to see this project fulfilled. During the reign of James, a good deal of his writings will be related to the image of an institution wherein full-scale scientific research can be carried out, giving rise to an extensive program of cooperative work. The author sees in the image of the king that of a new Solomon. This is an important element to the comprehension of the allusions to the biblical character in the New Atlantis, and dedicates to him one of his most relevant writings, the Instauratio Magna, in search of support for his project of a brotherhood of scientists, by which a massive information exchange could be made possible. Although James's reign was a period full of political successes, Bacon became Lord Chancellor in 1618, as well as a moment of intense intellectual production, the materialization of his project would be left to posterity with the creation of the Royal Society of London. Therefore, it is not surprising that the main institution in the New Atlantis is Solomon's House, created to the, I quote, finding out of the true nature of all things, whereby God might have the more glory in the workmanship of them, and man the more fruit in the use of them. The last quarter of the book, as we know, is dedicated to the description of its end, its instruments, the functions of its members, the rites and norms they observe. This College of Scientists is the real point of arrival of the trip. We must observe, however, that in the preceding parts we do not come across with any interlocutor who can give us a report about the political organization of the island. It is remarkable how scarce are the mentions of a king who, in fact, seems to have a merely figurative function. He does not welcome the travelers, he does not visit them during their quarantine stay in the stranger's house, and do not take part on the main ceremonies. However, what's the most surprising is that the greater honor a foreigner can have in the New Atlantis is not to be introduced to the king, but to have an interview with the father of Solomon's House. Tradition, according to Weinberger, believes that the New Atlantis is incomplete because it does not contain a teaching about government or political rule, because it fails to combine an account of the organization of the project of science with an account of the political rule necessary for the best form of human life. This is one of those aspects of the work which most raises questions among its scholars, its fragmentary character, or, to use a more adequate term, its incompleteness. The question of the completeness or incompleteness of Bacon's text, in my opinion, enables us to understand one of the implicit ways that Bacon points to a more direct interference in political matters, as I said before. Formally, its status as an incomplete text is doubly put in evidence. The report ends with the assertion that the rest was not perfected. In the preface to the reader, Raleigh, Bacon's personal secretary and chaplain, besides presenting the Utopia as a work unfinished, alludes to the author's objectives and tries to justify the incompleteness of the text. I quote, "This fable my lord devised to the end that he might exhibit therein a model or description of a college instituted for the interpreting of nature and the producing of great and marvelous works for the benefit of men, under the name of Solomon's House, or the College of the 6 Days' Works. And even so far his lordship hath proceeded as to finish that part. Certainly, the model is more vast and high than can possibly be imitated in all things. Notwithstanding, most things therein are within man's power to effect. His lordship thought also, in this present fable, to have composed a frame of laws, or of the best state or mode of a commonwealth. But, foreseeing it would be a long work, his desire of collecting the natural history diverted him, which he preferred many degrees before it. Thus, the immediate necessity to conclude another kind of work which was begun, and towards which Bacon showed a predilection, is the reason presented by Raleigh to explain the absence of a better detailed description of the social and political structures of the island. But it is easy to see how contradictory he is once we compare the last lines of the preface, where the reason for the work's incompleteness is given, with the beginning, in which it is mentioned that Bacon's purpose was to provide a description of a college instituted for the interpretation of nature, and this enables us to ask if the declared and reiterated incompleteness of the work may be literally interpreted. The question is considered irrelevant by Berneri, for as she sees it, even if Bacon had the intention of writing a whole part dedicated to the political organization of New Atlantis, he nevertheless would not have altered the fundamental character of a republic where science assumes the protagonist's role. And this because, like Plato, who adds meticulous detail to the, I quote, laws by which the existence of the guardians is ruled, and says very little about the other social classes, Bacon only pays attention to the institutions and to the members of Solomon's House, the guardians of his ideal society. However, what he leaves unsaid may be as meaningful as what he says. Plato and Bacon are exclusively dedicated to their ruling class because for them it is the only one that really matters. In fact, in the utopian genre, once the main institution of any utopia is appointed, all the others must be necessarily subjected to it. In this perfect world, the confrontation between two instances of power is not acceptable. Obviously, for Bacon, at this time already politically devastated, although in a constant endeavor to re-enter the political stage under the support of the king, it would be extremely difficult and dangerous, maybe even impossible, to represent in detail the submission of the state apparatus to his college of scientists, once the merely figurative representation of the monarch dismisses the very notion of apparatus. In this sense, I would say that instead of a reactionary attitude appointed by some of his readers, Bacon's prudent silence suggests that the power, once in the hands of the scientific community significantly alters the form by which society is organized. This new political structure in Bacon's time and in Bacon's text does not seem to be lost in a temporal report or in an unreachable future. Of such a new form, nonetheless, the author can only present some outlines, as those regarding religion or social coexistence, but almost nothing related to the government, since the current form would have already been overcome in the ideal world. Moreover, the idea that the state, if not totally subjected, is regarded to a level of power inferior to that of Solomon's House is made explicit by the father. I quote, "We have consultations which of the inventions and experiences which we have discovered shall be published, and which not, and take all an oath of secrecy, for the concealing of those which we think fit to keep secret, though some of those we do reveal sometimes to the state and some not. In conclusion, we believe that the alleged and formal incompleteness of Bacon's text conforms with the content in its entirety. Or to use White's happy formulation, it is a work of deliberate incompleteness. Formally, Bacon remains faithful to his literary matrix, the Critias. However, in the Platonic fragment, while Zeus is just about to discourse upon the punishment of old Atlantis, although he does not carry it on, for the dialogue abruptly ends, in Bacon's Utopia, the father speaks of the preservation and the glory of the new Atlantis, and the text ends when the discourse is completed, at least to the point its content suggests according to Spitz. Thus, leaving aside the silence, which can still be filled if we set ourselves to read between the lines of this utopia, Bacon's project can be seen as fully accomplished, with the description of Solomon's house. The considerations we have so far advanced make it possible to observe some points of confluence and also rupture of Bacon's utopian relation to the Morean paradigm. The influence of certain elements, such as the imaginary travel, the traveler narrator who describes a new and geographically distant country whose political and social institutions serve as a contrast and means of comparison with the English institutions of the author's time, and the very image of the unknown island, exhaustively explored in the subsequent utopian production. This presence, I repeat, is very clear and might dismiss further comments. Less evident in Bacon are certain aspects of the Menippean satire which Moraes made a broad use of in his work, such as the recurring employment of puns and wordplays, as well as the highly allegorical language, the semantic inversions, etc., which reveal a caustic criticism under the disguise of a sarcastic grin. The literary preeminence attributed to Moraes' text cannot be observed here. Romano Ribeiro affirms that the Morean paradigm is strictly related to the double tradition of Greek and Roman satire. The utopian paradigm emerges as the work of a humanist who is imbued with the classical tradition. It is a serio ludere written by a moralist in whom the contemplative life and the ideals of honestas and utilitas are permanently in confrontation with the political life. It is a Renaissance political dream, which is fulfilled as an abstract literary creation, which also works as a critical instrument. And according to Serres, nothing can assure us of the assertive character of the title De Optimo Republica Statu de Nova Insula Utopia, which can be otherwise interpreted as a mot or an exploratory subject to be discussed with arguments pro and con, on the line of the sophists, whom he so much admired, and simultaneously, according to the good rules of rhetoric and dialectics, two disciplines belonging to the humanist trivium. It seems that something similar to the meanings that the first French translators of Utopia, studied by Nadia Minerva, attribute to the work throughout the 16th, 17th, and early 18th centuries, can also be observed in regard to Bacon's text, as well as a good deal of the subsequent utopian production. Gradually, Utopia becomes a pamphlet, a political manifest, and if on the one hand there was no doubt about his literary preeminence in the intellectual environment that gave rise to it, on the other hand, as the years and decades pass by, the work conforms with that mental attitude, that ideal tension which is commonly called utopism. Therefore, regarding English 17th century utopian literature, Bacon's work can be seen as a turning point in the sense that he finds in Moraes those fictional resources which give more plasticity to the ideas that came from a long course of maturation. Bacon introduces a new element which will also be used by the utopian writers of the revolutionary period, and that can be seen as a variation of the temporal category until until then usually employed by utopian writers. There is a remeasurement of the temporal parameters, and the distant, almost implausible future of the previous utopian texts, with the possible exception of Francesco Patridi's La Città Felice, now appears on the horizon. And that gives rise to the above-mentioned idea of projectual tension. In Bacon, this tension raises from the absolute confidence in the possibilities of the new science. And in the authors from the revolutionary period to the Restoration, it is found in the idea of the process in the study of the political phenomenon, according to Ponzo. It is possible to observe in these writings a break with the cyclical vision of history, which will lead to the conjectural projection of history introduced by the binomial expression progress-revolution. This is what we can note in an utopian text that appeared after the publication of the New Atlantis. A description of the famous kingdom of Macaria, published in 1641, had its authorship a long time attributed to Samuel Hartley. Although there is a strong evidence of his cooperation in the writing of this utopia, Gabriel Plates, a member of Hartley's Invisible College, is now considered its author. Whatever be the case, Hartley was an enthusiast of Bacon's scientific project, and it is known that the foundation of the Royal Society is largely due to the effort of some members of his intellectual circle. The defense of the scientific enterprise as a collective work is delineated in Macaria. The text is a short dialogue between a traveler and a scholar about some laws and usages of the Macarians, a people mentioned by Hitlerdeus in the first book of Utopia. The author addresses it to the Long Parliament, I quote, having for my patrons Sir Thomas More and Sir Francis Bacon, once Lord Chancellor of England. The proposals of a political and moral reform, having Macaria as an example to all other nations, are sustained by the traveller in the opening of the dialogue. I hear that they, the Parliament, are generally bent to make good reformation, and if any experience which I have learned in my long travels may stand them in instead, I would willingly impart it for the public good. The traveler goes on to describe in general lines the political, social, and economical structure of Macaria. Throughout the dialogue, it's possible to note a profound conviction in the good effect of the collective effort, provided that individual rights and freedom are guaranteed. The art of printing will so spread knowledge that the common people, knowing their own rights and liberties, will not be governed by way of oppression. Why should not all the inhabitants of England join with one consent to make this country to be like to Macaria, that is numerous in people, rich in treasure and munition, that so they may be invincible? The freedom of public expression of thought is emphasized. Anyone hath conceived a new opinion, he is allowed every year freely to dispute before the Great Council. At last, the confidence in the development in a shared way of a solid philosophical and scientific knowledge is confirmed. I quote, Do you know any man that hath any secrets or good experiments? I will give him gold for them, or others as good in exchange. That is all the trade I have driven a long time. According to G.C. Davis, Macaria is the representation of the most utopian elements from Hartley's circle. By relating the renewal of knowledge, following the steps of Bacon and Comenius to a millenarist eschatology, Hartley's friends and collaborators searched for the reestablishment of man's power over the nature, the Great Instauration, a return to a pre-lapsarian state. The scientific knowledge, the perfect political institution, the proper social structure are seen as both divine gifts as a result from the human effort. Macaria serves as an example of what, from Bacon's Utopia and his intellectual attitude, when not directly from his philosophical and scientific thought, the utopian literature from the interregnum to the Restoration will be. The writings of Godwin, Harrington, Neville, Cavendish have a strong pragmatic character, and are strictly related to the major problems of the political scene of the period, in search for more immediate answers to such questions, something which, in our opinion, diverges from the 15th century utopia, which strives almost only to denounce the irregularities and imperfections of those institutions that give shape to social life. Bearing this in mind, in a lesser or greater degree, the aspect of a proposal is not altogether strange to the writings of Bacon and his followers.